Alright, here's my preemptive Q&A before we get into this shit. Why are you making this video? Because people like when I talk about the silly drag queen show. If you're a fan of the show, why can't you just shut up and enjoy it? Because believe it or not, liking a thing and offering criticism of said thing can coexist at the same time. Why are you not showing the video of the things that you're talking about? Because Viacom fucking sucks and I have to do backflips around copyrighted material, which often means I have to resort to vague B-roll and fan edits so that you can view this in your country. Why do you sound so angry? Because I've been working on this video script for months and apparently Y2Mate no longer fucking exists, which makes ripping footage consistently more difficult. Alright, that being said, enjoy the show. RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars has one of the most confusing legacies in the history of television. I mean, on paper, it should totally work. All-star seasons of reality TV are nothing new and are easily doable for any franchise. You cast some fan favorites across a couple of seasons who didn't quite make it to the end, maybe throw in an extra curveball or some more prize money to up the stakes a little bit, and you've got yourself a series with some built-in charisma and likability and a groundwork that you can use to rinse and repeat. And then there's RuPaul's Gulag for Wayward Homosexuals, which is notorious for not doing any of that, and it is made for some of the best and worst episodes of television of all time. The first season of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars premiered on Logo in 2012, and to me this is interesting for a couple reasons. I mean, the show was still arguably in its infancy at that point, and was really starting to hit its stride after season 4, but producers clearly knew that they had something really special, so much so that the first season of All-Stars went into production presumably pretty close to when season 4 ended. The producers even pegged fan favorites like Latrice and Chad Michaels, who the fanbase didn't even have as much time to sit with because their season was so new. So again, on paper, you have a season that should be a home run. The cast is made up of queens that either got very close to winning their original run, fan favorites who already had the robbed moniker attached to their persona until the end of time, and a few kooky wildcards who at the end of the day were never going to win, but just make for some really good reality TV.
Well, come on, Teletubby! Teleport us to Mars! What the fuck?
But this is All-Stars, and this is a drag queen competition show, so we gotta do something to up the stakes, right? Gotta throw the queens off their game a little bit. So what's the answer here? Let's make the entire competition revolve around team challenges and exercise in futility that will benefit literally nobody. I know this goes without saying, but RuPaul's Drag Race is a character-driven show. And it's at its best when the queens are able to shine on their own, and making an entire season where the contestants have to compete in teams and therefore compromise their drag for somebody else is not an enjoyable experience for people watching it at home or for those actually competing. I mean, that's why so many of them came back later on when the format was changed. So I won't dwell on this season for too long because it was super short, very experimental, and did have some fun moments here and there, but overall it's mostly written off by the fandom, the producers who made it, and the people who competed in it. And 4 years later, it seemed like everyone involved finally learned their lesson. Picture this, the year is 2016. Your serotonin has peaked during the Pokemon Go summer, and if you're me, you're about to start your first year in journalism school and you are not yet jaded by the impending political disaster hiding right around the corner, but I digress. Season 2 of All-Stars is looked back upon fondly, partially because it came at a very good time, and also because it just got so much right from the jump. I mean, the cast is a goddamn home run. Maybe a little heavy on the season 5 representation, but god was it worth it. Everyone in this cast was a frontrunner in their season and clearly had something to prove. And whereas All-Stars 1 delivered a product that no one really asked for, the producers went heavy on the fan service this time around. I'm 99% sure things like the talent show and the lip-sync twist were literally taken from Reddit, which comes back to burn them later, but for now it's new and different and really exciting. If you don't remember because it's been a while, All-Stars 2 rules work like this. Each episode is the top 2 of the week. Those queens lip-sync for a cash chip and end up getting the power to eliminate a bottom 2 or 3 queen with a lip-sync. Again, I'm pretty sure this was ripped right off of a Reddit post, but at the time it was a good way to change up the game, even if it made for some heartbreaking eliminations and could at times accidentally expose some producer fuckery. I mean, everything about this season was top-notch. The cast, the runways, the challenges, but the thing that took it from good to great? Episode 5, Revenge of the Queens. So quick rundown because I can't show the full thing for copyright. After Alyssa is eliminated from the competition, Fifi O'Hara, who was once again positioned in the show as the villain, starts saying some not so nice things about our favorite dancing queen. And face crack of the century, all of the eliminated queens are standing behind the mirror during this and are given a chance to enter back into the competition. After a partnered comedy challenge, Alyssa and Tatiana are given the chance to come back. They arguably give the best lip sync for your life in the entire history of the show, and Fifi O'Hara is eliminated. All of this is a fucking plus. This whole thing is so goddamn well done. Contestants have their own character arcs just within this one episode alone. All of it is dramatic, it's unexpected, and the lip sync actually has a real payoff because it's the first lip sync for your life we've seen all season. It's just so good all around. So after this, the show has some more great moments and wraps up with a satisfying conclusion of Alaska as the winner. Some will argue that this was rigged from the start, but you guys already know my opinions on this. I don't think having a pre-planned winner in this situation is the worst idea, as long as you have an entertaining and engaging roadmap to get there. And sure, All Stars 2 had its flaws in retrospect. First of all, Season 8 of Drag Race was basically cut short to be able to pay for this shit. Because All Stars 2 was filmed in the transition from Logo to VH1, some queens, like Ginger, weren't sure if they would have the opportunity to get on another All Stars season, so they went on before they were ready, and obviously this comes into play later, but overall this arguably is the best that All Stars has gotten, and is probably ever going to get. So now Drag Race has solidified itself as a powerhouse in reality TV. Contract negotiations are done, and they've got that pile of VH1 money ready to burn. So of course there's another season of All Stars, and it goes into production right away, and this is mistake number 1. The reason why All Stars 2 worked so well was primarily because of the cast. Each member casted was in the top end of their original season, many of them making the top 3, and with the exception of Ginger and Katya, we hadn't seen these queens on our screens in several years. Their drag had developed and changed, and many of them were eager to prove how they had evolved as characters and as people in that time. With so many fan favorites and contestants who were just, well, point blank good at the race, it's a hard season to follow up so soon, but that didn't stop these dumb fucks from trying. Not many people remember this, but somewhere in the beginning of All Stars 3, RuPaul even pitches the plot of the season to the cast as more of a redemption series. The cast is made up of queens who maybe didn't do as well, didn't place as high, and a few had come off of more recent seasons like 8 or 9. Quick disclaimer, it is not that these queens shouldn't have been casted. As proven with All Star 6, you can take a cast with a more spread out and random assortment of placements and still have it be good, but clearly the producers didn't know how to handle that approach to casting yet. This is where we first see the series start to crack under the pressure of itself. I think someone somewhere had to have known that due to production circumstance, the season was just not going to recapture the same magic that All Stars 2 did, so naturally their answer to that is to up the stakes and make it less noticeable. Cue the introduction of BB Zahara Benet, the first winner of Season 1 of RuPaul's Drag Race. It's decided that BB will actually compete with the cast on this season, a production choice so out of fucking left field that Reddit came up with an insane fan theory to make it more interesting than it actually was. I think BB is a great queen. I think she proved she could hang with some of the more recent players of the game, but here's the thing. There was no way they were going to crown BB again because the entire season would have been a waste, but not crowning her would be a bad look for everyone involved since she had won already. So they came up with a solution that again, nobody was happy with, which I'll get to in a little bit. The other problem with this season was that the lip sync twist wasn't a novelty anymore, and so not only was it getting boring to not see any regular bottom 2 lip syncs, but queens started to act more out of fear of backlash from the fandom than they would when it comes to playing the game strategically. This all comes to a head when Ben de la Creme, who was probably poised to be the winner of the whole season, eliminates herself. So after a couple of forgettable challenges and runways, we arrive at this season's top 4, Trixie, Kennedy, BB, and Shangela. With Ben gone, it's obvious to everyone who has watched the season along at home that this is Shangela's game to lose. So in the dumbest twist outside of the lip sync for the crown, of course, they bring back the queens who haven't been there this whole time to decide the season's top 2. This is so fucking stupid. And the reason why they did it is obvious. The producers had to take the responsibility out of their own hands when it came to crowning someone who wasn't BB. They basically wrote themselves into a corner. If BB won, when she definitely didn't do the best, the rigging complaints would have soured the whole thing. If BB lost, the show inadvertently tarnishes the legacy of their first winner. So this is their solution, which wouldn't have been as much of a train wreck if the queens had actually been clued in on how the whole season went after they had been eliminated, and didn't cast their votes predicated on the fact that they thought Shangela was cocky. This whole thing was so fucking dumb. I'm pretty sure the All Stars 3 finale remains one of the lowest rated episodes of the entire franchise's history for this reason. It wasn't fair to BB, Kennedy, or Trixie, and especially not to Shangela, and the producer- Shit. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the producers showed their ass on this one in the worst way possible. All Stars 3 clearly buckled under the pressure of high expectations that were set for it, and we all thought they would have learned their lesson after this, and then I had high hopes for All Stars 4, I really did. The makeup of the cast was better, although it was clear that a couple of queens were just casted purely for the meme, but whatever, that's where we're at now, I guess. The casting of this season is also interesting in particular because it's the first time the show admits to itself that it was wrong. Latrice and Manila, who were teammates on the original All-Star season, were brought back to compete now that the format had been changed. Because they enter the workroom together, many of the cast originally panics that it's going to be a team season again, a cheeky nod to how bad of an idea that was the first time around. Now with the clusterfuck that was All-Stars 3, I really think the producers tried their very hardest to play it safe this time. Manila was clearly supposed to be the winner, and it was a move that everyone would have been okay with, but then their own format bit them in the ass. Now this is a complaint that many have had with previous All-Star seasons, but it really showed with Manila's elimination. No matter how much you pre-plan, no matter how well a contestant does, they could still be sent home after only one slip-up, a factor that the regular seasons of Drag Race barely even provide that often. And that, many argue, is how it should be all the time. But in the actual constraints of reality TV, it is incredibly difficult for producers to be able to pivot when this happens because there's only so many episodes for them to salvage an arc for somebody else. I truly believe that this moment is what led them to change the All-Stars rules for the 5th season, but trust me, we'll get there. And so, after a season of not so memorable challenges, some pretty alright runways, obligatory producer fuckery, we arrive at our top 4, and there's really no clear winner here. All 4 contestants have had their own slip-ups, and you can make the argument one way or no ways for any of them to win. And this is where the show has its own shitty jump the shark moment that everyone hated. I mean, if you're looking purely at track record, Trinity did better the whole competition, but Monet did better in the final lip sync, and I think at this point was arguably more well liked if I remember correctly. And after the trash fire that was the ending to All Stars 3, I think the producers were afraid of making the wrong choice again, so they just didn't make one. No season of this show should ever have 2 winners. I think ironically enough, the closest argument you could make was for Raja and Manila back on season 3, but even then they had the self-awareness to just buck up and commit to one. And it was obvious that this was not the intended outcome of the season at all because of how the ending was spliced together in editing. It was clear that they had no intention of a double crowning because they didn't film one like they've done in past seasons, and if you look at the crowning reaction, Monet and Trinity are confused as fuck. So overall, All Stars as a franchise is just twisted up in itself at this point. In an unending quest to live up to the reputation of All Stars 2, they just keep churning out seasons in an attempt to recapture that spark without taking into account what actually made it good in the first place. And somehow, nothing is more emblematic of this than All Stars 5. All Stars 5 is bad. Like, it's the only season of the show that I would argue is objectively bad all the way through, and this is like sort of their fault and then also isn't. Let me explain. I think we all know at this point that Shea Coulee was supposed to win season 9 and genuinely got dicked over by production in a way that deserves its own video. Now, had All Stars still been on the trend of an every 4 years cycle, Shea probably would have had some actual competition to go up against because getting asked to be on All Stars was at one point actually a rare opportunity. But because All Stars comes around like once a year now, the queens get more of an opportunity to pass, say no, wait until they're ready, because they know that the shot is consistently available to them. And if word got around that Shea was competing, well, I could see why some of the queens who knew they had a good chance at winning would have passed on it. I can't even tell you what happened during like most of this season. I honestly don't remember, and that really sucks because Shea as a competitor, despite dominating both seasons she was on, deserved an All Stars level 2 competition. This is also the first time that the show introduces the lip sync assassin twist, which we still have now on All Star 6. I think it's been going better the second time around, but I was never really a huge fan of it. I think lip syncs are at their best when they have stakes, and having one performer with literally no stake in the game just seems kinda counterintuitive to me. So All Stars 5 is kind of an inverse of the problems with seasons 3 and 4. Yeah, they got the right winner for once, but the road to get there was so fucking boring. And the show has literally proven that you can have an obvious frontrunner and still make the rest of the season entertaining. I'm sure most of the All Stars 2 cast knew Alaska was probably going to win, but still played their hearts out because they knew they were lucky to have the opportunity to compete with the best. And then fast forward to All Stars 5, and your biggest threats are Blair St. Clair and India Farah. Like, okay. Now, when I first heard the spoilers for the All Star 6 cast, I honestly thought it was gonna be shit. I think everyone agreed that the makeup was like really random, more so than seasons 3, 4, and 5, and would have just suffered in its own right because there were no clear frontrunners besides, well, Ginger, whose inclusion on the season had been very controversial from the jump. This is once again the show having to admit to its own audience that its previous approach to casting had been flawed, or at least that it's changed. I don't blame Ginger for wanting another shot at all. I think she should have won season 7, and she claimed she was pressured into doing All Stars 2 and ended up getting blown out of the water basically due to recency bias. Honestly, I'd want another shot at it too. But in some ways, this could also be the show jumping the shark again. If you're not actively in the know about all the behind the scenes tea, Ginger's inclusion on the season is probably confusing to the average viewer, and it opens up the floodgates for any other queen who has already been on a normal All Star season to come back again. And I don't know how that plays into future casting choices, nor can I pretend to. That being said, All-Star 6 is surprisingly like a breath of fresh air. I think it's the best attempt at an All-Star season since season 2, and I'm cautiously optimistic even though I'm worried that they'll find a way to fuck it up in the end. And I haven't been able to really pinpoint what that difference is, but the aura overall just seems more positive. I think the strategy of handing out wins to a bunch of different contestants works to the advantage of a cast like this because it plays into the idea that truly anyone could be a frontrunner. And I always thought it was the problem with more recent All-Star seasons, but this cast proves that it is possible to make the unpredictability of it all good and entertaining. I also think it's far enough from the shadow of All-Stars 2 to finally be considered its own thing with its own rules, which has definitely worked to the producer's favor. I will say that the Paramount Plus thing, though, is honestly bullshit, and that streaming is inevitably going to end up gutting the franchise because of oversaturation, but you can make that argument with basically any format of TV nowadays. So yeah, that's my opinion on all of All Stars as a franchise. I want to, as always, remind people that I love all of these queens, and I, as a fan, just want a format that serves everyone equally and well and fairly, and while I think they lost their way a little bit, there's always room for improvement, and I think surprisingly they're getting there. And maybe, just maybe, the real game within a game is the friends we made along the way.